Richard Okonkwo had built his empire from nothing, but today he dressed like he had nothing at all. Standing before his bedroom mirror, the billionaire businessman barely recognized himself. Gone was the tailored Italian suit and gold Rolex. Instead, he wore stained coveralls that reeked of diesel, cracked rubber boots, and gloves with holes in the fingers. An old cap and oversized sunglasses completed the disguise. "This better be worth it," he muttered, adjusting the cap lower over his face. His son David had been home from London for 3 months, and every conversation ended the same way. "Dad, Grace is amazing. She's humble, respectful, and nothing like those materialistic women. Her family is simple, and she has the kindest heart. I want to marry her." Richard wanted to believe him. He desperately wanted his only son to find genuine love. But he'd lived long enough to know that people often showed one face in public and another in private. Years ago, his late wife had suffered humiliation Richard would never forget. A woman his eldest son was dating had visited their home unannounced. When Richard's wife answered the door in casual clothes, the woman had assumed she was a maid and treated her with disgusting contempt. The woman's mask had slipped, revealing the ugliness beneath her beautiful face. From that day, Richard made a vow. Before any woman became an Okonkwo, he would test her character when she thought no one important was watching. Now, climbing into one of his company's garbage trucks, Richard started the engine and headed toward Rosewood Heights, where Grace lived in a rented apartment she claimed her father had bought for her. Traffic was terrible that morning. A broken-down trailer blocked 2 lanes near the port, causing a massive delay. By the time Richard reached Grace's street, it was already 8:45 a.m., 45 minutes late. He parked a rumbling truck outside her gate and knocked firmly. Within seconds, the gate flew open. Grace stood there in a fitted designer dress, phone clutched in one hand, car keys dangling from the other. Her perfume was expensive and overwhelming. Her makeup was flawless. But the moment her eyes landed on Richard, her expression twisted into pure disgust. "You just coming now?" she spat, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Do you know how long I've been waiting? I called your useless company since morning." Richard removed his cap respectfully and bowed slightly. "I sincere di apologize, ma. There was serious traffic near the—" "I don't want to hear your excuses." Grace cut him off coldly. "You poor people always have some stupid story. If you can't do a simple job on time, why did you even accept it?" She looked him up and down with contempt, her nose wrinkling as if he smelled offensive. "Look at how dirty you are," she continued, her voice dripping with scorn. "Is this how you represent your company? This is exactly why you people remain stuck in these terrible jobs forever. No discipline, no respect for time. Useless." Richard felt each word like a slap, but he kept his voice calm and respectful. "Ma, I truly apologize. It won't happen again." Grace wasn't listening. She had already turned her back, phone pressed to her ear, complaining loudly to a friend. "Girl, can you imagine? This garbage man just arrived. These poor people don't take anything seriously. I'm so tired of dealing with them." Richard quietly began collecting the waste bins, his heart growing heavier with every insult that reached his ears. This was the woman his son praised endlessly? This was the humble, kind-hearted Grace? When he accidentally splashed a tiny drop of water near her shoe, Grace exploded. "Are you blind?" she screamed. "Do you want to ruin my dress? You think because you're poor, everyone should pity you? Just do your dirty job and leave my compound." Richard finished quickly and climbed back into the truck. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Grace stood at her gate, still on the phone, laughing about this stupid, lazy driver she'd just scolded. Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His chest felt heavy. "So, this is who my son wants to marry," he whispered to himself. "God help us all." Richard drove straight to his company headquarters, his mind racing with everything he'd witnessed. When he walked into the building still wearing his garbage collector disguise, his employees froze in shock. "Sir, what happened?" his secretary stammered, her eyes wide with confusion. Richard managed a tight smile. "Just testing something, Angela. Nothing to worry about." In his private office, He removed the filthy cap and sunglasses, then sank into his leather chair. The weight of disappointment pressed heavily on his chest. His son's glowing descriptions of Grace echoed mockingly in his mind. Humble, kind-hearted, respectful. None of it was true. He picked up his phone and dialed his most trusted associate. "James, I need you at the mansion tonight. We have urgent matters to discuss." That evening, James arrived promptly at Richard's estate. The older man sat in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey on the desk before him. "Sir, you look troubled," James observed, taking a seat across from him. Richard leaned forward. "I met David's fiancée today, but she had no idea who I was." James raised his eyebrows. "The disguise worked?" "Perfectly," Richard replied bitterly. "And what I discovered was worse than I feared. She insulted me from the moment she opened her gate. Called me lazy, useless, dirty. She spoke about poor people like we're beneath contempt. There was no kindness, no patience, no humanity in her eyes." James shook his head slowly. "That's deeply concerning, sir." "My son believes she's perfect," Richard continued, his voice cracking slightly. "He talks about her like she's an angel. But James, if he marries this woman, his life will become a nightmare." "What do you need me to do?" James asked. Richard's expression hardened with determination. "I want a complete background investigation. Her family, her past, her finances, everything. I need to know who Grace really is before I allow this marriage to proceed." "I'll start immediately," James promised, standing. "You'll have a full report within 48 hours. After James left, Richard sat alone in the darkness, thinking about his late wife's wisdom. Don't let our children marry beautiful faces with ugly hearts. The next morning, David bounded into the dining room with infectious excitement. "Dad, Grace wants to meet you officially. Can she come for dinner tomorrow? She's been preparing for weeks." Richard looked at his son's hopeful face and felt his heart break a little. David was so in love, so blind to the truth. "Son, sit down. Something's come up." David's smile faded. "What's wrong?" "I received news this morning," Richard said carefully. "A very close friend has been hospitalized. It's serious. I need to be there." "Oh no." David's face fell. "Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know yet, but I must go immediately. I'm afraid I'll have to postpone meeting Grace." David nodded, understanding but clearly disappointed. "Of course, Dad. Family first. I'll let her know." After David left to make the call, Richard heard his son's frustrated sigh from the hallway. That sound pierced his heart, but he had no choice. The truth needed to come out properly at the right time, with undeniable evidence. 2 days later, James returned with a thick folder. His expression was grave. "Sir, Grace has been lying about everything." Richard sat up straight. "Explain." "Her family isn't wealthy at all," James began. "Her father is a retired mechanic living in a small rented flat. Her mother sells provisions from their doorstep. The apartment Grace claims her father bought, it's rented, and the lease is in her cousin's name, not hers. The car she drives? Also her cousin's, borrowed while he's working abroad." Richard's jaw clenched. "She fabricated her entire background?" "Yes, sir. And there's more we're still uncovering. But what we found so far suggests she deliberately created a false identity to attract wealthy men." Richard stood and walked to the window, staring out at his manicured gardens. "Being poor is not a crime, James. I started with nothing myself. But lying, building a relationship on deception, that I cannot accept. Should I continue the investigation?" "Yes," Richard said firmly. "I want everything, every detail. Because before I tell my son the truth, I need absolute proof." After James departed, Richard whispered to the empty room, "What kind of woman did my son fall in love with?" Richard couldn't sleep that night. The investigation had revealed Grace's lies about her wealth, but he needed to understand something deeper. Was her cruelty toward the poor a one-time occurrence, or was it who she truly was? The next morning, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He would test her once more, but this time as someone even more vulnerable than a garbage collector. He would approach her as a starving beggar. He dressed in torn, filthy clothes that hung loosely on his frame. When he looked in a mirror, he saw a broken old man, desperate and helpless. Perfect. Richard walked slowly to Grace's compound, his steps deliberately weak. She was outside again, leaning against her borrowed car, scrolling through her phone. "Please, Ma," Richard said in a trembling voice, approaching with an empty bowl. "I haven't eaten in 3 days. Just small food, anything you can spare." Grace looked up, and her face twisted with pure disgust. "Are you mad? Can't you see I'm busy? Get away from me." "Ma, please," Richard begged, bowing lower. "Even leftover rice. I'm very hungry." She hissed loudly. "Why would I give my food to someone like you? You lazy old man. Go and find work instead of begging like a dog." Richard tried once more. "Ma, I'm too old to work anymore. Please, just small help. I said leave." Grace shouted, her voice filled with venom. "What's my business if you haven't eaten? Is it my fault you're useless? You poor people make me sick. If you come here again, I'll call security to beat you. Now disappear." Richard stepped back slowly, his heart heavy with certainty. This wasn't anger or stress. This was simply who she was, a woman with no compassion, no mercy, no humanity. He whispered softly, "God bless you, Ma," and walked away. Grace shouted after him, "Don't come back here with your poverty." That evening, Richard called David to the mansion. His son arrived cheerfully, unaware of the storm about to break. "Sit down, David," Richard said gravely. "We need to talk about Grace." David's smile faded. "Dad, what's this about?" "I know everything," Richard began. "I know she lied about her family's wealth. I know the apartment and car don't belong to her. I know she's been deceiving you from the beginning." David's face went pale. How do you know all this?" "I had her investigated. But that's not all. I also tested her character. I dressed as a garbage collector and visited her home. She insulted me terribly, called poor people lazy and worthless. Then I went back as a beggar, asking for food. She refused and told me I made her sick." David stood abruptly, his face flushing with anger. "You did what?" "Dad, that's manipulation. That's invasion of privacy." "I did it to protect you," Richard insisted. "No," David shouted. "You did it because you don't trust my judgment. Grace is a good woman. Everyone has bad days. You tricked her, embarrassed yourself, and now you're judging her for it? Son, she lied about everything. So what?" David's voice cracked. "Maybe she was scared I'd reject her if I knew the truth. People make mistakes, Dad. Nobody's perfect." Richard reached out. "David, please listen." "No, you listen," David said, his hands shaking. "I already proposed to Grace. She said yes. We're getting married, whether you approve or not." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. You proposed?" "Yes, and I love her. I won't let you destroy my happiness because of some test you created." David's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Dad, but Grace is my choice. She will be my wife." Richard stood frozen as his son walked out, leaving him alone in the study. "What have you done, Michael?" he whispered into the silence, using his son's childhood nickname by mistake. He slumped into his chair, wondering if he'd just lost his son forever. 1 month after the traditional wedding ceremony, David came home early from work to an eerily silent house. No staff greeted him at the door. No one took his briefcase. The mansion felt abandoned. "Grace, where is everyone?" he called out, walking through the empty corridors. Grace descended the stairs casually, pouring herself juice as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, I fired them all." David froze. "You did what?" "I sacked every single one," she said coolly. "They were too slow, too poor, too irritating. I don't want those kinds of people around me." "Grace, those people worked for my family for years. You can't make decisions like that without consulting me." David's voice rose with anger and disbelief. She shrugged dismissively. "They were useless anyway. I don't need servants. Then who's going to cook, clean, manage this entire house?" Grace smiled confidently. "I will. I can handle everything myself." David stormed upstairs, too frustrated to argue further. But the next evening, he returned home exhausted and starving, calling out for dinner. Grace appeared slowly, yawning. "Oh, food? I didn't cook. I was tired." David stared at her in disbelief. "You said you could manage everything. I've been working all day. Why are you shouting?" she snapped. Go buy something outside if you're so hungry. Something inside David cracked. My father warned me. I should have listened. Grace's eyes flashed with rage. Your father? That foolish old man who dressed like a beggar to spy on me? He should mind his own business. Don't you dare talk about my father like that. David roared. He built everything we have. He's a great man, and you will respect him. Respect him? Grace laughed bitterly. Your father is not better than my parents, who you probably think are beneath you. My father never insulted your family. David shouted back. But you insulted him without even knowing who he was. He told me the truth about you, and I was too blind to see it. I defended you. I fought him because of you, and now I see he was right all along. Grace's face paled as the weight of her mistakes crashed down on her. David grabbed his phone and dialed his father's number with shaking hands. When Richard answered, David's voice broke. Dad, everything you said was true. I'm sorry. I should have listened. Richard's voice was gentle, full of forgiveness. I knew this day would come, son. Come home. Let's talk. But David hesitated. Dad, there's no food here. Grace fired everyone, and she won't cook. Richard sighed knowingly. There's a small food stand down the road, near the old pharmacy. The owner is a wonderful young woman named Joy. Her food is excellent, and she's the kind of person who treats everyone with kindness. Go there. David wiped his eyes. Thank you, Dad, for everything. I love you. I love you too, son. That night, David drove to the food stand and met Joy, a gentle, humble woman with a genuine smile and a kind heart. When he learned she worked late nights alone and had been harassed by street thugs, he offered her a job on the spot, doubling her income and providing safe housing for her and her mother. Joy's gratitude was sincere, her joy unfiltered. For the first time since his wedding, David felt genuine warmth from another person. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Grace sat alone in the darkness, realizing she destroyed everything with her pride, her lies, and her cruelty. She'd married a good man and turned their home into a battleground. But the worst was yet to come. James had finished his investigation, and what he discovered would shatter everything completely. James burst into Richard's office the next morning, his face grave. Sir, you need to see this immediately. Richard looked up from his desk. What did you find? Grace is already married, James said quietly, placing a folder on the desk. She has a husband named Marcus and a 5-year-old son. The room seemed to spin. Richard opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were wedding photos, birth certificates, screenshots of messages, undeniable proof. There's more, James continued. She and Marcus are con artists. They target wealthy men together. Grace pretends to be single, gets close to them, pushes for legal marriage, then they drain the victim's accounts and disappear. Your son is their latest target. Richard's hands balled into fists. That's why she kept pressuring David for a court wedding. Exactly. Once it's legal, they can claim everything. Call David. Now. Within an hour, David sat across from his father, staring at the evidence spread before him. Photos of Grace with another man. Pictures of her holding a child. Messages planning the entire scheme. No, David whispered, tears streaming down his face. This can't be real. I'm sorry, son, Richard said gently, but you need to confront her. End this before it's too late. David drove home in a daze. When he entered, Grace was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Who is Marcus? David asked coldly. Grace's phone slipped from her hand. What? Who is Marcus? David repeated, throwing the marriage certificate at her feet. And who is the child in these photos? Grace's face went white. I can explain. Explain how you're already married? Explain how you planned to steal everything from me? Explain how you lied about every single thing? David's voice shook with rage and heartbreak. Please. Grace dropped to her knees, sobbing. Marcus forced me. I needed the money. I didn't want to. Get out, David said quietly. Get out of my house. Now. David, please. I'm your wife. You're Marcus's wife, he corrected, pointing at the door. You're a liar and a thief. Leave before I call the police. Grace gathered her things with shaking hands and fled, crying hysterically. David collapsed onto the couch and wept. Over the following months, life slowly changed. Joy moved into the staff quarters with her mother, bringing warmth and genuine care back to the mansion. She cooked with love, managed the household beautifully, and treated everyone with respect. David found himself healing. Joy's kindness reminded him what real goodness looked like. For months later, he proposed to her in the garden, and she tearfully accepted. Richard attended their simple, beautiful wedding with joy in his heart. This was the daughter-in-law he'd always hoped for. Meanwhile, Grace and Marcus, consumed by rage and jealousy after hearing about David's new marriage, plotted revenge. One night, they drove toward the mansion with dark intentions. But fate had other plans. On a sharp curve, their car lost control. The vehicle spun off the road and crashed violently. Neither survived. When the news reached Richard the next morning, he simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Evil destroys those who practice it." David held Joy's hand tightly. "Thank God we're safe." Joy prayed quietly for peace and wisdom. The darkness Grace had brought into their lives ended that night. And in its place, light, love, and genuine happiness finally took root in the Okonkwo home. Richard looked at his son and daughter-in-law and smiled. His late wife's words echoed in his heart. "Don't let our children marry beautiful faces with ugly hearts." He had protected his son, and now David had found real love, the kind built on truth, kindness, and respect. The end. Moral lesson. True character is revealed not in how we treat those who can benefit us, but in how we treat those who could do nothing for us. Kindness, humility, and honesty are the foundations of lasting relationships. Pride, deception, and cruelty may offer short-term gains, but they ultimately destroy the person who practices them. Love built on lies will crumble, but love built on truth will stand forever. Question for you. Have you ever discovered someone's true character when they didn't know you were watching? Share your experience in the comments below. Backhand index pointing down. Remember, the way you treat the least important person reveals your true character. Treat everyone with kindness and respect. You never know who you're really talking to. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our life-changing stories.